When someone talks of the Call of Duty cycle, you usually think of this image. It is the process of Call of Duty repeating the same events over and over again every single year. When the game launches in October-November time, people go crazy over how good it is. By the time January comes around, people are still enjoying the game. In February, you then hate it like everybody else. March comes around, and you say the older game is now the best game. By May, we go crazy over the next Call of Duty trailer, and then when November comes around again, we repeat the same cycle by saying how good the new Call of Duty is. And that's how it seems to go every year. It comes out, we love it, about halfway through, we hate it, we then see the next Call of Duty trailer in May, and then by the time the next one releases in November, we all love COD again. Now of course this isn't exactly true. Sometimes people don't like a new Call of Duty when it releases straight away in November. Other people enjoy the games all the way through their life cycles. Sometimes people hate it at the beginning and then go on to love it. Everyone is different, we all have our own opinions, but this is the stereotype that Call of Duty has. This is, in general, a year in a Call of Duty player's life. But since this video specifically is to do with the zombie side of the game, does this same thing apply? Because this year, right off the bat, giving us Deer and Fang and Vanguard, whereas in November, everyone goes crazy on how good the new Call of Duty is. Well, we've all seen from its reception, the majority hate it, so immediately that breaks the stigma of everyone loving the new COD as soon as it comes out. And what this made me think was, well, has this been the case for every COD Zombies game that's released previous to this? Black Ops 4, Cold War, 2, 3, 1, World at War. How were those games received at the beginning of their life? And then how did we go on as we progressed through their cycles? So going back to the very beginning, and I'm going to put both World at War and Black Ops 1 in the same category here, simply because this was the beginning of Call of Duty Zombies. In World at War, it was only a bonus game mode. Zombies wasn't even supposed to exist in that game. Plus, I can't personally talk about this because during 2008, I would have been 10. The first Call of Duty I can remember playing was Modern Warfare 2, but the first Zombies game was Black Ops 1. So I can't give my personal experience on what the reception for Zombies was during that time, but from what I can remember a few years later and from what I've seen other people say, it was a pleasant surprise. Obviously, nobody expected it. Nobody's going to complain about a bonus game mode that's never been in Call of Duty before. Maybe there was people saying, how are there zombies in a World War II realistic, in quotation marks, game? It's stupid, it's fantasy. I don't know, maybe people did say that, it wouldn't surprise me, but I bet for the most part it was well received, and surely it had to be because it went from being this random thing and led to Treyarch adding even more maps to it in World at War through DLC 1, 2 and 3 because there wasn't a DLC 4 back in World at War. So that only tells me that the reception for Zombies back in World at War in the beginning had to have been good on the most part, because otherwise I don't think they would have spent time, money and resources adding to something if they didn't think it was going to go anywhere. And I also wanted to include Black Ops 1 into this because, similar to World at War, Zombies was still in a very early stage. The first map, Kino der Toten, was supposed to be a World at War map. 5 was more of a bonus, and just searching up off YouTube, Black Ops 1 Zombies Hate, why people don't like Kino der Toten, there really isn't anything online. And because it was the first Zombies game I picked up personally, Black Ops 1, Kino der Toten and 5 is what made me get into COD Zombies, just because it was still so early on in the, not only Zombies life cycle, but Call of Duty as a whole. Black Ops 1 only came out in 2010, and Call of Duty, in my opinion, only became mainstream and popular when COD 4 released in 2007, only 3 years before the release of Black Ops 1. So in that sense, Call of Duty as a whole was still pretty young. And so we go back to the Zombies mode. This was Treyarch's second attempt. I don't think at this point it was yet to fall into the trap of the life cycle of COD. But that all changed with Treyarch's next installment, Black Ops 2. This was where Zombies massively ranked up because now Zombies had its own personal team. Before this, in World at War and Black Ops 1, Zombies just had a few developers working on it. Now, in Black Ops 2, it was assigned its own development team, a bigger budget, its own resources. No longer did they have to take maps from the multiplayer or campaign, they could create them from scratch. This was the first time Call of Duty Zombies leveled up, and you could tell that because the first map we got was Tranzit. Now I don't think I need to explain to anyone what the reception for Tranzit was upon its release or even through Call of Duty's lifecycle. I don't think, from what I remember, it changed as we progressed to the end and then moved on to the next Call of Duty. Tranzit was absolutely hated, and we look even to this day in 2021, almost 10 10 years later now, because this game came out in 2012, Tranzit, for the majority of people, is still one of the worst maps in Call of Duty. I wanted to get an idea on what people were saying at the time back in 2012, and a couple of people on why Tranzit was so hated said, it's because Tranzit is a terrible map, discourages teamwork, no viable way to recover, bad perk placement, and a lack of proper wall weapons, as well as a pack-a-punch that's far too difficult to get, and on top of all of that, every game is wasted for the first hour just having to set everything up. Someone else said it's too spread out, and I agree with the perk placement, it is bad, and the pack-a-punch is a pain to get to, and there is a lack of decent weapons. I'm not a big mystery box fan, and too much relies on getting something out of the box, and the fog is just a nuisance as well. But for some reason I like Tranzit. I think I like all of the buildables and the different goals you can set for yourself in game. So that just goes to show some people did like it, but I agree, from what I remember, some of the major complaints about Tranzit were it was too big, the locations of perks and wall weapons were a problem, as well as the pack-a-punch being very difficult to get to and annoying. Also, the fog, the lava, the denizens, the transport system. The point is, I think we can all agree that upon its release, Tranzit wasn't well received. And that brings us back to this chart where, in November, usually people would go crazy over how good the new COD is. For the Zombies mode at least, I don't think that was the case. Tranzit had a lot of hate. As we move on through the cycle, you get to January, everyone still enjoys the game? Well, that's debatable because for Black Ops 2, that was the release month of DLC 1, which was Revolution, and that contained our second Zombies map, Die Rise, which people even to this day have mixed receptions about. I think generally it's considered an average map. By March, everyone's saying that the older game, in this case, Black Ops 1 is now the best one, but what I think was also different was, by the time DLC 2 came around, which was April, and that included, for me, one of the best Zombies maps of all time, Mob of the Dead. This was where this game took a massive turn, because after this we also got Buried and Origins, also considered some of the best Zombies maps ever. So whereas normally in a COD player's life cycle you would get excited about the next Call of Duty in May, in Zombies' case, from March all the way to November, it was definitely on the up. And so looking at this as a whole, to me, as our first example, this proves that Call of Duty Zombies doesn't necessarily follow the Call of Duty life cycle, multiplayer or the campaign, because Black Ops 2 Zombies was hated at first, people weren't going crazy over it, and by March, when everyone's saying that the older Call of Duty is now the best one, Black Ops 2 flipped this, released Mob of the Dead, Buried and Origins, and a lot of people were saying, actually, this game is better than the last one. And just before I move on to Treyarch's next game, Black Ops 3, I just want to show you an interview that Jason Blundell did with the Zombros podcast, where he explained why Black Ops 2 Tranzit released in the way that it did. And I want to show you this because I think it will be something useful to think about as we move on. So Jason Blundell was asked about the backstory of Tranzit's development.
So that was a little bit before my time, but I was still at the studio kind of working when that was being made. It's got a really interesting backstory, which probably people may not kind of realize. Its ambition was definitely kind of greater than what the final release was.
Okay.
You know, when it was being proposed, and that was Jimmy who was kind of working on that at the time.
Of course.
It had lots of game modes and different versions that you could run. So people that kind of know at the moment there's, you know, standard mode, and then there was Grief, right?
Yep.
Well, Tranzit was being constructed. It had like 4 or 5 different entirely different ways of playing it. It was very exciting, and it actually kind of suffered from its ambition in a weird way, because when we'd all test it as a studio and play it, and we'd play all these different modes, and they were all kind of halfway there. So there's one, like, I think it's called like something, Capture the Meat or Chase the Meat or something. It was like this one where there was meat things around the map, and you had to go and get it, and it's like safe zone, and then areas get cordoned off or opened up, and lots of different modes. It was really fun. But all the modes were kind of a quarter halfway there. And at the time, again, Black Ops 2, right? Black Ops 2.
Yep.
Black Ops 1? Black Ops 2.
Well, 1 to 2, yeah.
1 to 2, yeah. It was on the back end of kind of development. In other words, Zombies got the kind of the minimum amount of support in the group. Now, when I say minimum amount of support, you're still talking about 30 odd guys, which used to be back in the day when I was young. That was team sizes,
Of course.
But for maps of this size and complexity, it was quite a small team. The problem that happened was, as we got closer to the end of the development, something that Jimmy faced was that. And he'll be able to speak about this far better than I would, but what happened was there was a call which was like, okay, we can't get all these modes to the kind of standard we want, so we need to make the call to kind of strip them away. and switch them off. But that decision was made, unfortunately, a little bit too late. And so what happened is the core experience that got released had a bunch of things where, if that's all they'd focused on, some of those rough edges would have been smoothed out.
Okay.
And so that's the kind of I'm sure, let's put it this way, if Jim was to sit down and look at that, he would probably make a series of strategic changes if he'd had the full development just looking at that map, just with that focus. Because he was doing some really ambitious stuff with the different game modes, and it just ran out of time. That's one of the dangers of development. It's zombie development is very much like sailing a boat while building it at the same time. And one of the problems is you can say, I want to do all these features and these things, and if you attach everything to it, when you realize you can't get there and you have to take it away, suddenly other things then start falling apart because they're all linked. And that was unfortunately some of the properties that Tranzit inherited, which was there was things that were connected and the focus was going to different places. It got stripped away, and then other things had to get stripped away, and then what you were left with had some, in my opinion, some fundamental challenges, which if you'd given the full time to focus on just that, would have been far smoother.
So was Turned one of those game modes that was originally turned off, but then I guess brought back with DLC 1? Because I think it released with Die Rise.
Yeah. I don't know specifically, actually. That's I'd have to kind of go back and check. I remember it being there, but I couldn't speak specifically to when it was switched on or switched off.
Fascinating. I'm so glad we finally have some kind of way to address, though, what happened with Tranzit, because there's always rumors through the years of running out of time. That was awesome. Thank you for that for the community.
That's okay. It was. Here's the thing. It was. I'm a big advocate for the map, but here's the thing. I'm a big advocate for the map with what it should have tweaked, because I get the frustrations when people say, oh, I don't like this and don't like that. I think every member of the development team, possibly Jimmy included there, would have said yes, and it was just a condition of the development. And that's, when we develop stuff, we always say people only judge what is in the box or on the shelf. You could have gone through all this pain and suffering and all these other things, but it doesn't matter. It's only what's on the shelf that's judged and viewed. And unfortunately, that was just the condition it found itself in. And I've done the same, campaign maps and zombie maps. There's been bits where we tried to strive for something and we missed it slightly, or we overshot and then we ended up messing something else up. That's a common occurrence in development, and it's totally fine for a community also to kind of call you on that. It applies to any kind of creative art I've seen, right? There's I keep on using painter examples, but there is a situation where you have to step away from the painting, right? And if you don't, you can actually ruin it. We have that situation as well, where we overcook something, and you can also undercook something. So they're all very natural and normal things in development.
So Jason tells us that Tranzit's initial ambition was definitely more than what released. It was supposed to have 4 or 5 different game modes, 4 or 5 different ways of playing it. However, Tranzit almost suffered from its own ambition. At the time, on the back end of Black Ops 2, so Black Ops 1 and in between this game, Zombies only had a team of about 30 people working on it. Compared to now, that's nothing, but if you think about the size of Tranzit, the problem that Treyarch had is, as they got closer and closer to the release date of this game, they realised that they couldn't get all of these modes that they planned to make for Tranzit out on time. Most of them were half finished. So either they get released half finished, or you cut them from the game. And unfortunately for Treyarch, that decision was made too late. Basically saying if they made that decision earlier and cut out all of those different ways of playing Tranzit, maybe a year before its release, or 2 years, then they would have had enough time to just fully focus on one thing. Whereas they were trying to do a lot of things at once, they took on way more than they could handle, meaning there wasn't this one single thing they could work on and perfect. So that also meant that Tranzit or Green Run, the map or mode that we are playing today in Black Ops 2, if Treyarch decided to just focus on this one thing instead of make 4 or 5 other modes for it, they would have had more time to work on what we have right now and make it what they envisioned, the best it could be. Treyarch were just too ambitious, and unfortunately, they ran out of time. Anyway, that was just something I wanted to play because I think it might be useful to come back and think about later on. But as we move on to Black Ops 3, this game released with Shadows of Evil and The Giants. Now, The Giant was a bonus map, you had to pay for it, but Shadows of Evil was free on disc, and I can remember this one because, like Tranzit, it also received a lot of hate. The main criticism from what I can remember is that it was so different to what Zombies was. Black Ops 3 introduced these alien type creatures that we'd never seen in Zombies before. The story took a turn from realism, you could say, to more fantasy. A lot of people didn't like that. BO3 introduced the Gobblegum system, new elements to the Pack-a-Punch machine. Shadows of Evil had these rituals. But from what I can remember, the main complaint about this game at the beginning was that it wasn't zombies, because of, like I mentioned, the whole alien fantasy thing. And this is so funny to go back and look at now, because Shadows of Evil for me now is one of the best zombies maps of all time. It's definitely in my top 3. For me, it's either Der Eisendrache, Mob of the Dead, or Shadows of Evil. However I'm feeling on the day, any one of those 3 could be number 1. But it's so strange to go back and think how a map, when it first released, had not as much hate as Tranzit, but it certainly didn't get the best reception. And then here we are 6 years later, where by most it's now considered to be one of the best zombies maps of all time. Just going back 5 years ago to see what some people said, this comment reads, "I don't dislike Shadows of Evil, but I agree that it can be tedious. Most of the hate for Shadows was when it first came out. If you didn't have the giant, it was your only map and you had to do the same rituals every time you want to play zombies, which is no fun for a quick, casual game or repeated play. Now there are other maps, you have other options. Right now, bearing in mind this was 5 years ago, he said, I think Shadows of Evil is alright, but I understand the disdain for it at the start. Think of how many times Zombies fans had to complete those same rituals. It gets really old, and I still can't play more than around 5 games in one setting. This kind of reminds me of a situation that we are in now, where it seems like one of the major complaints about Shadows of Evil was that in order to progress and open up the Pack-a-Punch machine, you had to complete the same, I think it was 4 rituals every time. That reminds me very much of Vanguard, where in order to progress through the rounds, you have to complete the same 3 objectives every time. And he does say here, the hate, as I said, for example, wasn't on the level of Transit because there was another map to play in Black Ops 3 at the start, and that was the Giant. So if you didn't like Shadows of Evil, even though it was a bonus map, it was relatively cheap, you could go and play that instead. And that's what a lot of people did. And that's where I do think this differed from Vanguard. I just find it so strange how a map can go from not being the best received at launch to being one of the best ever. And we go back to this chart of the COD lifecycle. Normally in November, people go crazy how good the new COD is. For Zombies, that wasn't the case. There was a mixed reception. By the time February comes around, everyone hates the game. Well, that was the release date of DLC 1, and what map did we get then? Der Eisendrache. Just like Shadows, one of the best maps ever. So instead of hating the game in February, it began to improve and change people's mind. And then we get to March where everyone says the older game is now the best game. I think there was some people saying that Black Ops 2 was better than BO3 at that time, but most people were saying it was an improvement. And then after that, we had Zetsubo no Shima, Gorod, and Revelations. Gorod Kurovi had an amazing reception. Zetsubo no Shima didn't, and Revelations was mixed. And whilst I do think in May a lot of people were going crazy about the next Call of Duty trailer, I think in March when everyone was saying that the older game was better, I don't think, from my memory, from March to November, everyone was saying that BO2 was better. So once again, like Black Ops 2, the Zombies mode doesn't follow this same COD player's life cycle, but we can see a pattern of it following its own, and that then brings us on to Black Ops 4. Now BO4 was a strange one because I can't really tell if the game was hated or not. I personally didn't hate it at launch, but as for everyone else, it's kind of hard to gauge what most people's thoughts were, because it was without a doubt the biggest launch we'd ever seen, the most Zombies maps ever, the most changes we'd seen to this date. BO4 is a hard one to gauge because obviously now it's considered to be one of the worst, but at its launch it's difficult to say. Going back and looking at some older comments to see what people thought at that time, this person said, here's why I think BO4 is the worst Treyarch Zombies game so far. The ridiculous amounts of special zombies, the new perk system, there was no reason to change it from the perfect old one to this. People will try and say it's innovation and gives you more options, but it limits your options way more than the old one. If Treyarch actually wanted people to use different perks, then they should have bugged the old perks or made new ones that were actually worth using. All of the camos are reskins from MP camos. The HUD is trash and the scoreboard was moved to the pause screen for absolutely no reason. This is a small complaint, but it still counts. They finally added Zombies exclusive weapons with weapon kits, but you can't even put attachments on them because they're not in MP. The crazy amount of bugs and crashes at launch also didn't help. It really feels like Treyarch is trying to be more like other devs when it comes to Zombies, when it used to be the other way around. People around here try to say it's innovation and that change is good, but no, change for the sake of change isn't good. If it ain't broke, don't fix it is an expression for a reason. I was going to say, was BO4 Zombies in the same situation that Treyarch was in with Black Ops 2's Transit, but that can't have been the case. This game released with 4 maps. From what I can see, it had everything Treyarch wanted it to have, but it was just a case of it didn't work out. As this guy says, it almost felt like Black Ops 4, Treyarch were trying to be more like other developers. They were trying to innovate Zombies, but too much. Changing things just for the sake of changing things and saying, look, we've innovated isn't necessarily good. As the expression goes, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. So yeah, going by this, I don't think Black Ops 4 got off to a good start, and where this differs from other games is, I also think as we went on through its life cycle, I don't personally think it really picked up, whereas with BO2 or BO3, people hated it, and then throughout the year, it got better. With BO4, I think its reception initially was mixed, and then instead of improving, it just sort of stayed on the same level, which, going back to our chart, in November, when the game released, were people going crazy over how good the new COD is? No, I don't think so. And then by February, when everyone hates the game, whereas with BO2 and 3, actually everyone began to like it more, with Black Ops 4, I think that hate kind of continued. For some people, it might have got a little bit better, it might have got a little bit worse, but from what I could gather, I think it stayed on a similar pace. So BO4 kind of broke the Call of Duty Zombies life cycle. And that then brings us on to our final fully finished game, which was Black Ops Cold War. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one because it's something we can all remember since it came out last year. Did people go crazy over how good it was in the beginning? Yes and no. Everyone loved the new perk system, the field upgrades were a massive improvement on BO4, the gameplay is arguably the best we've seen. The main criticism was the story and the fact that it released with one map, whereas previously Black Ops 4 had 4 maps at launch, Black Ops 3 had 2, so to go from that amount to just 1 was disappointing. I don't think on its release people went crazy saying, this is amazing, but the reception wasn't bad either. And then February comes around, everyone usually hates the game, and I think Cold War Zombies went on a slow, but still upwards rise. Firebase C released, that had a mixed reception. Where I think this game massively suffered was the 5-month wait between DLC 1 and DLC 3. Because DLC 2 was Outbreak, and a lot of people didn't like Outbreak, a lot of people did, because of its mixed reception and how different that was to the standard round-based zombies mode. If you didn't play Outbreak, it felt like there was a massive 5-month gap between the next major content drop for zombies, which was Mao the Totem, and from what I saw, that was what killed the hype towards the end of that game. Mao the Totem released shortly after Forsaken came out. I don't think anyone in March was saying that Black Ops 4 was now the best game, so again, when you compare the life cycle of zombies to the life cycle of multiplayer, it shows to me that whenever you see this, it is more based around the multiplayer side of the game. And that definitely shows with Vanguard, because right now we can only judge this game based on the November part, and instead of people going crazy over how good it is, well, yeah, I don't think I need to say it's definitely the opposite. But could Vanguard follow the same cycle that Call of Duty Zombies has followed in pretty much every game that's come out? Black Ops 2 with Tranzit, people hated it at the beginning. By the time February came around, people liked it. Black Ops 3, a lot of people didn't like it in the beginning. By the time February came around, people loved it. Black Ops 4, a lot of people didn't like it at the beginning. This is where the cycle kind of breaks, because by the time February came around, it didn't really get any worse, but it didn't get much better either. Black Ops Cold War, for the most part, people liked it at the beginning, and then as we get to March, April, May, etc., because of the drought of round-based maps compared to BO2 or BO3, it did get better, but not on the same upwards trajectory that those games were on. But I think where Cold War differed is it wasn't really hated like those games at the beginning, and it seems like Vanguard is following the exact same Call of Duty Zombies life cycle. In November, everyone hates it. The question is, will it follow the same cycle that Black Ops 2, 3 and Cold War did? Just like those games where they didn't get off to the best start, will it get better? Because Black Ops 4, for example, does show you that adding more content to a game doesn't necessarily mean it will change people's opinions. So in conclusion, we can say that the Call of Duty Zombies life cycle doesn't follow the same life cycle that the multiplayer has. Instead, it follows its own pattern. Whereas multiplayer is usually hyped up at the beginning, everyone's saying how good it is, and then by February everybody hates it, and by March everyone's saying the older game is now the best. With zombies, it's usually hated in November and gets better by February. So we'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, there we go. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. As always, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, drop a like rating, make sure you are subscribed to stay up to date with the latest videos on the channel, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Until then, goodbye.